Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Fizz Free, and this one's more of a question and answer session. Your host Ruth asks fellow co-host Clare several very pointed questions, and Clare was not prepared for each of these, so the answers that you hear are very authentic, very genuine, very honest. They cover several topics, as Clare's experience of alcohol and her journey through sobriety, as well as other things along the way, and a very heartwarming, a very touching ending to this one actually. So we do hope that you enjoy, and give us a like and a follow on social media platforms. Thanks for listening. It's Fizz Free.
Welcome to Fizz Free. My name's Ruth and we've got Clare with us today. Clare, the first question that I'm going to throw at you, which is probably quite a harsh one to start off with, but we want to be brutally honest with our listeners. How much were you drinking at your peak?
I think at the height of my drinking, I couldn't just buy one bottle of wine a day. So let's say at the very most, a bottle and a half on a high intake day, I could probably hit 2.
Would you stretch to 2 bottles if you didn't have work the next day?
Exactly.
Or... Okay.
Exactly. So Sundays, because obviously you're allowed to start drinking in the day, it would start in the afternoon, and those were the days that obviously were elongated. And the first couple always went down quickly. And then I'd probably slow down a little bit after that. But when I think back to that, probably was the case for the last 2 to 3 years of my drinking. And then of course what happens is, as we know, is that tolerance level just gets you to that point where you can function on that amount of alcohol. I often think now, just going off on a different tangent, if I had that amount of alcohol in my system now, I often think how I'd be. Think, gosh, how have my organs changed? How has my brain changed? How would I react to that much alcohol in my body? Yeah. But obviously then I functioned.
Yeah. So talk us through, you said Sundays were a bit of a trigger for you. So talk us through a typical day. Would it be get up and try and get all the chores done as quickly as possible so you could go to the pub?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being brutally honest, and I think I will admit to, Craig Beck has been such a massive part of my journey. And I think one of the things that stick into my mind were, him talking about a highly functioning alcoholic. So we can all convince ourselves that we are not a highly functioning problem drinker. Yeah. We can all say to ourselves that we haven't got a problem because we don't do this and because we don't do this. But then those words rolling off his tongue really made me think, well, I am functioning, but I am a problem drinker. And I think if you needed to label yourself, which I probably did to move forward, that was a better suit for me. And he also goes on to ask 10 questions. And one of the questions that he asked was, have you ever planned your day around alcohol? And that was absolutely the case for me, which makes, I do have some guilt over that, because I probably rushed things with my husband, rushed things with my daughter in particular. We'll go to the park and then we can go to the pub. And that was our Sundays, really. I can't actually remember the last time I went to a pub on a Sunday, unless obviously we were eating or whatever. Yeah. But we would just call at the pub or go to a park near a pub so that we could have a drink. So I'm like looking at her on the swings going, okay, we've been here half an hour. We can probably, get away with another half an hour and then go to the pub. That's awful. It is awful, but if we're being honest...
You have to be honest.
That is like the case. Whereas if we're going to do some comparing, the comparison now to when we go to the park, I'm not hungover whilst I'm there. So yesterday, actually, we went to the park in the afternoon, and her and I were on the seesaw, and it was one that you could stand up on. And I'm actually obviously a lot fitter now and a lot healthier. So we were balancing on these seesaws together and playing together, and I was in absolutely no rush. And those moments, like I was sat on the seesaw and I'm just thinking to myself, these moments are the moments that I do need to compare and say it's the difference between, you know, enjoying this time with her rather than willing it away and like so that I can get to the pub. It's hard to admit, but at the same time, I also know that there's so many people in those same situations, and it's not that person that's the problem. It is the alcohol in your system that is the problem. And I think that's the only way that I've been able to manage with the guilt, really.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can turn it around.
Which leads me quite nicely on to one of my other questions was, do you have any regrets?
Yes, is my initial response to that question. There's been some really key sort of points where I did get, you know, so drunk that it affected that night so badly. And I obviously blacked out for a lot of that. There's probably 2 or 3 that I can think of. But the regret that I have is how I made other people feel. So how I was reacting to situations, because obviously you can kind of piece together what happened, and that was just so not me. It wasn't me. It wasn't my moral standing. I'm so pleased at the person that I am now, and I'm still growing, but you know, I'm still know that I'm a much better person without that in my system. And there's probably 2 or 3 really big times that I think I just handled that situation so badly, and I was such not a nice person in those times, and not the person that I would ever aspire to be. Those are the bits that I regret. The bit that I don't regret is the fact that because I've gone through those situations and those times, and there is absolutely no worse a feeling than having one of those experiences and lying in bed the next day with such guilt, such hangover, and being thoroughly depressed and sad, I suppose, is the only way that I can describe it. Just really, really sad, and asking myself, what on earth am I doing with my life? I've got, you know, a loving husband, an amazing daughter, a job that I love, and yet there's this side, this element of my life that's making me unhappy. But alcohol was making me escape what? I don't know. It wasn't making me escape anything. I didn't need to escape. Well, obviously I know now that I didn't need to escape from anything. So yes, I regret those times, and I'm sure there's more than 2 or 3, but 2 or 3 definite sort of situations that happen that I still probably think about. But I have dealt with it.
I'm going to probe you a bit more there, because one of my other questions was, and I know it might be difficult, and you only have to tell me one if you're feeling a bit sensitive, but what is one of your worst memories?
One of my worst memories was we were out with a group of people that have featured in my life for a long, long time. They're not family, and we don't get together very often. And there was one person in that group of people that just naturally I wouldn't get on with that person. It wouldn't be somebody that I hang around with all of the time. You know, there's nothing wrong with that person. It was a he. He's probably very opinionated. He's done some things to certain members of my family that I disagreed with. He's quite a controversial character, and he'd done nothing wrong on this particular evening. I had just got very, very drunk very, very quickly. I hadn't long had my daughter, so I suppose I hadn't drunk obviously during my pregnancy. I didn't drink a lot. Soon after I had her, that kind of climbed again after I'd had her. So my tolerance to it was probably lower than it was. But I thought that I could drink like I not, used to. So I think that's how it all got to a bit of a head. And I was verbally abusing him to the point that somebody had to say, Claire, I think that's enough. I think that you shouldn't be speaking to him like that anymore. And that was, obviously I was in and out, and kind of piece the night together. And I did get in touch with him, and I did apologise soon after. And I did stop drinking for 8 or 9 weeks after that. And actually I lost a lot of weight after it and stuff. So I knew, deep down, I knew. So if, let's just go, his morals I didn't agree with. The way he was, I didn't agree with. Whether that's right or wrong, that was just like the way that it was. But I was so much worse. How could I ever condemn how he was as a person when I had gone in unantagonised and sat there and told him exactly what I thought of him? Yeah. And I just, it was... I didn't drink for about 8 or 9 weeks after that. I was in such a peaceful place, other than the regret of how I'd spoken to him. I remember having a fruit tea every night, completely detoxing and doing really well with my food. And then I started again. You think, why did I do that? Why wasn't that the wake-up call? And there was probably 2 or 3 of those. Perhaps not. That probably is the worst one, really. Oh, I haven't spoken about that for so long. That's so weird to talk about. But I'm sure other people have had those same situations, really. But my regret is, all the things that he did that he probably knew were incorrect probably got justified because I did something way worse. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that was like, I don't know how to describe that. It almost justified the things that he did wrong, and I'm like, oh, that annoys me because I wasn't in the right frame of mind to be the bigger person.
Yeah.
So the morning after that incident had happened, I spoke to my husband, and I actually told him that I thought I was going to go to an AA meeting, because I think, and I think part of that is quite a good topic to bring up in that sense. And I would never ever run down any method that helps you is absolutely key. Exactly. And I know of people that have gone to AA and it's been really, really successful, but obviously I can only relate to the things that has happened to me. And I think that there are also other really good methods that can help, that suit you. So for me, obviously listening to podcasts, which is a big reason why we're doing what we're doing, and listening to audiobooks were definitely the right thing. I needed to be self-taught as to what to do. But I think back then, not being open to the world of podcasts, not being open to the world of what we call quit lit, not being open to the world of like Facebook and things like that, made me think that the only way was that. Obviously, Ruth, you'd sent me some links to, just because we'd had a conversation, quite a brief conversation, really, and you were like so upbeat, so happy, so like to be sober. And I remember you saying, well, you could be like this. And I was like, no, I love a glass of wine far too much. I'm not going to be able to be sober. That was in the February, and I was listening to them, and I was listening to podcasts, and then the one obviously leads to another, doesn't it? You can research them, you know that they're there for one, which I didn't really, and you can read books. And then it wasn't until the June, so gathering all that information in my brain, really, that made me where I am today, really. So there was times where it was scary, for sure. I think scary for my health. I was very, very bloated inside. I had pains in my kidneys. Wow. My head was constantly fuzzy. I never felt like I was firing on all cylinders because you're always recovering. And then you think to yourself, well, that's a normal amount. Like, everybody drinks like that. That's a normal amount. But the reality is, it was nowhere near a normal amount. Everything from, without being discussing bowel movements to headaches to, and it's not until, and obviously it takes a while to recover and to get to your organs and your brain to be as good as they're going to be. It doesn't mean to say that it's back to how it was pre-drinking, because I don't think I actually appreciate how I feel today.
So I'm going to ask you a question which is probably a bit of a weird one, because obviously we're all about, giving up alcohol and not seeing any positives. But a bit controversially, do you have a lot of happy memories from drinking, and was it harder to quit because you romanticised about those memories?
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important point to get your head around. So I had such a fabulous time in my 20s doing an events job that I absolutely loved, which was all about alcohol. And then I met the man that I married, and he's a chef, and so everything was about food and wine. And we had lots and lots of really good fun, going out at restaurants, eating, drinking, going for weekends away, and we had an absolute blast. Would I have had such a good time if I hadn't have been drinking? I think now, yes. But it was part and parcel of that time in my life. That's really controversial to say, isn't it? Because I'm sober now. But I think, in fact, I've just read a Matthew Perry book, and he talks about the fact that he wouldn't, if he could go back again, and he's gone through absolute trauma, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I was really shocked for him to say that he wouldn't have given up not having alcohol. And it really made me think of my circumstances. So that's a really good question. Yeah. It's hard because if I could have another positive that comes out of my sobriety, it would be that my daughter doesn't drink going forward.
Yeah.
I can't control that, can I? And I certainly wouldn't control that. But, she's a fresh, got a lovely little body that's all working properly, and I want her to stay like that without having the damage of alcohol. Yeah. So that's a really hard question, but I think it created part of my makeup that was me. Yeah. And I still believe that I wouldn't be the person that I am today had I not gone through those experiences. Do I wish that it had led to me drinking to the excess that I did, because I didn't drink to excess at that time. I drank a fair amount. I drink probably more than I should have done, but it wasn't to the excess that it was in the last couple of years, my drinking.
Okay,
does that answer your question? I don't know if I've answered that question.
You kind of have. I think you're a bit conflicted, because the way I've seen you answer that is, looking back now, I've got the confidence to enjoy myself as much as I did, but back then I thought I needed alcohol to enjoy myself. That's how I've interpreted that answer. If
I could go back in time and do that all again without the alcohol, knowing what I've known, I've had the best 2 years of my life. Okay. And that's without going out and having those experiences, because obviously I've got a 9-year-old girl, and your life is completely different to how it is in my 20s. But I think it goes back to having feelings, doesn't it? Because alcohol numbs feelings. So I have definitely felt joy on a completely different level, and appreciation and gratefulness on a completely different level the past 2 years than I have probably my whole entire adult life.
So my next question then leads quite nicely onto that. Do you wish you'd have quit sooner than you did? Do you look back and think, why didn't I just quit like 10 years ago?
Because there was warning flags, which answers the other question better. Is if I could have stopped drinking when it stopped getting fun, I would have still drank the time that I had fun. But unfortunately, you can't have one without the other. So I had some real fun up until that time, but then it got very not fun. And the reason that it happens, which I'm sure most of our listeners know, because we experience the same thing, is that because you have to increase the amount of alcohol in your system for you to get the same effects, then that's when it starts not getting fun. So just repeat the question again for me.
Do you wish you'd have quit sooner?
Yeah. I wish I'd have quit at that time where it stopped getting fun. So I think, you know, there was, like I say, those few incidents that happened that wasn't fun, obviously. There was what I was doing to my body, which wasn't fun. So yes, is the answer to that question.
So I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, and just to confirm with our listeners, I haven't prepped you on these questions because I wanted your complete honest answer. You're probably thinking, what is she going to ask me now?
I am, yeah.
There was a period in your life when you and your husband, there was a change in jobs and you were struggling for money. I remember coming around to your house and you were showing me the most basic tin of soup and saying, this is what I've got to have for lunch today because I'm struggling to pay the bills. How much were you spending on wine?
Exactly.
Talk me through
I did.
Talk me through how you justify, because we've all been there, let's face it, I'm no angel. How do we justify not spending money?
In my eyes, it wasn't essential. That's why, which is really, really, really sad. If you are just starting out your sober journey, one of the best things you can do is get an app that counts up how much money you save.
Yes, because you did this, didn't you?
Yeah, but mine's, gosh, it's like $7,000 or something ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, in 2 years?
No, it's crazy. Yeah, 2 years.
Wow.
And that's only like something ridiculous like £8 a day, which wasn't true, really.
No, yeah.
It's
especially
not
if you would spend that at the pub on 2 glasses, and then you'd go home and have more.
That's only if you were drinking 1 and a bit bottles, not even 1 and a bit now. I mean, I don't know, you know, I still get I get a bit shocked at how much, you know, I buy alcohol for my husband, and I still think £7 really, or £8, or gosh, you know, that's still, you know, it's so much money just for a bottle of wine now, I think. And I would do things like, if I went to Marks and Spencer's and had, gosh, they used to have the dine-in for £10. And I'd say, will you be spending £5 on a bottle of wine tonight anyway? So really, the meals only cost you £5. Now I'd think, I'm not spending that because I could get a meal for like however much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really hard times. You know, we didn't have much money, but you know, you can kind of see why, you know, the person on the park bench that hasn't got anything other than a bottle of whiskey, because that's the most important thing in their life. It all encompassed, because I was going through a hard time, that did like let me escape it for a while. But would I have gone through such a hard time if I'd have saved the money? You know, it's just the irony of it really. But I know that there's lots and lots of people in that position. I just don't feel as guilty now. I mean, let's go on to the positive, but I just don't feel so guilty now if I get something for myself.
Leading on from that, because I've heard you mention your husband a couple of times now, and you've just referenced that when you buy his alcohol. First question is, does that bother you that he still drinks? And 2, were you worried that your relationship was going to change when you decided to quit?
The only thing that bothers me about him drinking is his health. When I stopped drinking, I realised how little he drank. So I thought I'd got a complete wingman, to be honest with you. He was always willing to go to the pub, you know, we'd always have a glass, you know, some wine in the house, you know, and that's what like our relationship was, you know, because when we first started going out, it was very much restaurants and wine, and it all goes hand in hand, doesn't it? So the answer to the first question is, I wish he drank less for himself, but I don't think he drinks anywhere near to the amount that I thought he drank. So he can sit on like a beer for, you know, a couple of hours.
How do people do that? How?
That's the thing, isn't it?
That's
do you know
the
why?
difference.
Do you know why, Ruth? Because he's habitual. He's a habitual kind of person. So I don't think he would break that habit. Equally, I don't think he can break the habit of not doing it. But he wouldn't break the habit of going, like Catherine Gray says, you never drink in the morning until you do.
Yeah,
you never
exactly.
spend your last grocery shopping on alcohol until you do. He's just not that person. I think I could be like really, really honest as well and just say, like, and I think that's in answer to your second question, did I think it was going to change anything? Yes, at first I did. I remember, because I stopped drinking in the June and July is my birthday, and I remember, so obviously I was a few weeks in, and it featured quite a lot in our conversations. I probably wasn't as honest with him then as I am now. And I remember him saying, are you going to drink for your birthday? And because I was taking everything day by day, which is another conversation, which is really important, I didn't know how to answer that question. I didn't know if I was going to. I didn't know if I was just going to do it for a short period of time, for a long period of time. But what I did know is that I didn't want to. And I thought, are we going to have, because that was our first time that we'd gone out, if you want to say that, without having a drink. Yeah. But what I can say about him is he is the most supportive person when it comes to me not drinking. He is always the person that says, because I have some no secco in the house most nights now, and if I haven't got any, I'll say, you've got no secco for tonight. Do you want me to get you some? And then when we go out, he'll say, I've been to the bar and they've got this really good mocktail that I thought you'd like. And I know it's probably nothing for him, and he doesn't even think about it. But for me, for him to accommodate me in that way and to make sure that they have got something that I like. And he gets really angry when they've got no alcoholic. And I think that's really, really sweet in a way. He wants me to be happy. He wants me to have a good time. And he knows to do that. It is nice to have a mocktail, or it is nice to have a bit of, non-alcoholic fizz when there's a bit of a party. Some people don't do it, but for me, I like to do that. And it's nice that it's important for him because he knows it's important for me.
Yeah. I remember, just to interrupt you there, I'll never forget when I think you'd been sat with your husband he was having a glass of wine, you was having no secco, and didn't you accidentally pick up his glass?
Yeah.
And you had to spit it out straight away, and you're like, no!
That has happened a couple of times, and just going back to that actually, which is a really good point that I've been talking about to a few people recently, is I think we all romanticise. So going back to that question, do I miss? Yeah. I think you romanticise particularly that first sort of year. Yeah. You can look at a cold glass of wine on a warm day with somebody sat outside a beer garden, and you can romanticise about it. And I did for a long time, and I still did. And this year was the first year that I'd gone abroad without having any alcohol. And I think those first, even though I'm 2 and a bit years in, I still thought before I went on holiday, it's the first time I've been abroad. I knew I wouldn't drink, but you're still conscious. I have not been in that situation before and not drank. So and we were walking down this street and there's bars either side, and this woman just looked like she was so enjoying this glass of wine. And when you think, that feeling come back again. And then there was this accident with the no secco and the wine, and I obviously had to spit it out, but I wanted to, but it was in my mouth for like a few seconds, and oh my god, it tasted like petrol. Absolutely vile. It was really, and I thought, I cannot believe I spent years drinking that stuff. It tastes so that romantic, that like dream, that want completely dissipated. What I realised is actually it was a hot day and I was thirsty, and I wanted something cold and wet.
So a couple of questions I'm going to throw at you now. And the first one is, were you one of these people who told everybody? Or were you one of those who kept it to yourself or just told a few, that were around you? And two, how did you actually do it? Was it listening to books, reading magazine articles, joining Facebook groups? Talk us through your kind of resources, really, of what you found worked the best.
So the answer to that is no, I didn't. I think the first few days, I remember I didn't say anything to anybody. And then my husband said, oh, but you won't be drinking tomorrow, will you? And I went, no. And then the third day came and he said, are you not drinking? I went, I don't think so. And I think not putting that pressure on yourself is really, really key. For me, it was. I mean, some people need to tell the world and stick to it, and that's absolutely fine. But my journey wasn't like that. And then when, obviously I told you, Ruth, what was going on, probably 2 or 3 weeks maybe I was in, before I said, oh, I've like, I'm doing all right at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you've got to say, because you've got to go, I'm doing all right at the moment.
Yes.
No one's got a crystal ball. We don't know how, but again, patting ourselves on the back each day that we do. And then I think I'd done sort of like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then I think I'd like mentioned it to my mum. And I think she doesn't say a lot. I know she's ultra pleased and proud that I don't drink anymore for my sake. And I'm really lucky that my family are so quietly supportive, because that's what I needed. I didn't want someone to go, oh my God, that's brilliant. Oh, I hope you don't ever drink again. I didn't need that, because that's too much pressure. I think they were just like, that's awesome. Like, if that's what you want to do, that's really, really good. So I think it was quietly and carefully to start with. And now I shout it from the rooftops and talk about it to anybody that's willing to listen.
So talk us through your resources then. What did you find really useful as a support network? Definitely
Quickly. Definitely podcasts. I also just joined one Facebook group online, and I think it's really important to join just one to start with. I just stuck at that one, and I probably utilised that more in the last kind of, I'm actually just come off Facebook now, so it doesn't feature, but those kind of groups, it was like perhaps the last 9 months when I probably wasn't listening to as many podcasts, probably not listening to as much quickly, probably felt a little bit more comfortable about things. And what it did is, because you've got people on such different parts of their journeys, so you've got people that are going day one again to 20 to 30 years sober. You had those twinges of, oh my God, could you imagine going back to day one, like, and feeling how that first person felt, which we all have to have a day one. We all have to go to that place. Nobody bypasses that. But it made me grateful that I'd come further than that. And then the aspirations of seeing somebody with a twinkle in their eye 30 years later, giving some really, really good advice. Like, they're still on a journey. They're still, it still features in their life because they're still telling somebody that they're sober. So those were my resources, as well as having people that I could talk to, real people that I could talk to. And I think you can't compare yourself. And I think this will be one of the really good things of having this podcast, because the three of us are so different.
Yeah, definitely.
And have had such different experiences. And I probably will be the person that, like, completely, probably overshares, spill the beans, tell it as it is, and that's fine. And then there's other people that have had a completely different journey, and perhaps I can't talk about it quite as much, and that is absolutely fine too. But having those people around you, if you do want to talk or just go, actually, I can just totally relate to that, that's really key.
The last thing I wanted to sort of bring up, because I think, how long had you been sober at your wedding?
11 months.
11 months. And I'll never ever forget looking at you on that day, and I just thought, she's got this. Like, you were so present, you were so there, and you were taking everything in. And I remember you walking up to me, and I don't know if you'd requested it or whether the DJ just put it on.
I'd requested it. Well, it was on my playlist.
It was Ed Sheeran, Bad Habits. And this is to our listeners. If you haven't really truly listened to Ed Sheeran, Bad Habits, and looked at the words, he openly admits that he had a bit of a problem with alcohol. And that song is purely about how evil it can be. And you grabbed my hand, you dragged me to the dance floor, and we just sober danced. And it was just... It was just
we made it at that point in time. We made it, and I felt like we'd, like you say, just completely got it. And it was, if I think about it now, I can't believe that you brought that up, actually, just because it was just such a special memory, and it was just so lovely. And I remember at my wedding, I wanted to be 100% present. I wanted to talk to as many people as I could. I could be consciously making sure that I just networked and made the most of that day, made the most of every second, and everyone was so joyful.
Let's put this into context just quickly. Just tell the listeners, when was your wedding actually planned for, and why did it get cancelled, and the difference?
So I was meant to get married during COVID in 2020, and I got sober in 2021, and then I got married in 2022. It's crazy, isn't it, when you think of it? It could have been such a different... I'd have been drinking champagne at 8 o'clock in the morning.
I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you would have been slumped in a corner asleep
would
at 9 o'clock at night.
I would have been most... and there's nothing more... horrendous than a drunken bride. And when you think of how many thousands of pounds it takes to put a wedding on, and those thousands of pounds you would have not been there for, because I would have been, like you say, in fact, I've been to a few weddings and I've seen that happen, and I am so grateful of my sobriety, and that will definitely be a standout day as to me being grateful.
And let's leave it on your absolute saying, how do you feel sober? You are totally
capable.
There we go. So thank you so much, Claire. I'm sorry, I feel like I've really grilled you here, but
no, you have. I feel like really enjoyed it. It's just I look at the whole experience as a positive, and I think that's the only way to go forward, is to think of the whole experience, the good, the bad and the ugly, as a positive.
Thank you for listening to Fizz Free from your hosts Ruth, Jane and Claire. A reminder, we're 3 ordinary women who cut alcohol out of our lives and now feel passionately about sharing for free the multiple benefits of living a sober lifestyle. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, on most streaming platforms, as well as on X. We'd love it if you give us a like, a share, a follow to spread the word, and to get in touch by email, it's fizzfree0@gmail.com. All the best for a fizz-free life. Less fizz, more free.